It's not haunted. It is not haunted.
Just outside the city limits of Vincennes sits the historic structure on Hart Street Road, which can be found today in much disrepair. But back when it was first constructed, it was held in high regard. This property has been referred to as the Knox County Poor Farm, the Poor Asylum, or the Knox County Infirmary. The mission of the county was to fulfill the provisions set in the state constitution of 1816 that each county should care for its poor or indigent population.
In 1821, Knox County officials built 2 log cabins over on Bunker Hill as the first attempt at providing this service. In 1851, they constructed a simple 3-story brick structure at that location, which burnt down at the hands of an arsonist in 1881.
But out of the ashes was born a new effort to construct something not only new, but something lavish, right here on Hart Street Road.
People in that time period were very proud of their county facilities. So they hired Joseph Frick, a noted Evansville architect, to design it in the high fashion of the time, Italianate style, with the bracketing under the eaves. It had a tower and the arched windows and all. And it was put up in 1882, pretty quick time by our standards. And it wasn't just the building, it was also a farm. And the theory was that the inhabitants of this would be able to work on the farm and it would be self-sustaining, so it wouldn't cost the county anything to operate. Of course, that never really happened because these people were, many of them, mentally unsound, or they had injuries like they were missing an arm or a leg, or had emphysema, or any number of things. Or you had widows with their children, single women with their children, all that sort of thing. So it never quite did that, but it was one of the points of pride to show this off to people as being an example of something that Knox County could be proud of. We have this Poor Asylum that's in the latest fashion.
The Poor Asylum operated here until 1923, when the county turned the property over to Purdue University to serve as a model farm, a precursor to Purdue's current extension system. But what happened to the Poor Farm residents at that time? The county moved them to a building in town on South First Street, until that property was chosen for an exciting development plan.
In 1934, they were going to build the Clark Memorial, and they were going to clear that ground. And so the county came back, and they wanted their building back. So Purdue turned it back over to them, and then it was operated again as the poorhouse, or the Poor Asylum.
While the property resumed taking care of those who were in need, services were also starting up spanning a few decades that eventually rendered the Poor Farm unnecessary.
Provisions were being made for the poor and indigent and incapable. You had mental facilities for those that were, as they called it, feeble-minded back in those days. And you had pensions for widows and children. And you had an orphanage that would take care of them too. And there were a number of things. So by the 1950s and 60s, there weren't nearly as many people out here as there had been originally.
So that transition was very important when you think about what happened in the 70s and even into the 80s with housing programs at the federal level with HUD and the establishment of both the city and the county having housing services. In fact, we're one of the few counties in the state that have both a city and a county housing department, but all those things made that type of programming obsolete because more housing was becoming available for people. Other things were being built.
Mark Hill worked as a social worker in Knox County for decades, and as he shares, this structure isn't just a piece of history for him.
So when I first started as a social worker for the Samaritan Center, I was working with both adults and kids at the time, and one of my very first clients was actually the same aged person as myself, and he was one of the last residents of the old poorhouse. And so I would go out and visit him on site and actually sat outside on the steps and would kind of talk to him. And at that time, that programming was starting to kind of come to its conclusion, and other housing and different options were available in the community.
They finally moved the last inhabitants out, and then the building was empty for a while, and then the KCARC came out here, and the county turned it over to them to be their offices.
KCARC had already signed a 99-year lease on the outlying acreage surrounding the Poor Farm. Moving their offices into the building there just made sense for the corporation, which was growing in staff numbers. Board Director Jerry Coonrod has been with KCARC since the beginning.
It wasn't a real nice building when we got it, but it was pretty. It had the different ornamental stuff on it, and we liked it, and the people that worked there liked it. But as time went on, they didn't like it because things started leaking on the roof went bad, and there was just a multitude of things that had to be fixed.
KCARC officials in the county came to an impasse on a way forward with the property. KCARC was willing to make additional improvements, but only if the lease of the building was made to catch up with the existing 99-year lease on the rest of the acreage. But the county wanted to shake only for a 10-year lease. So with that, KCARC bought the former Johnson Controls building on 6th Street and moved their offices out of the Poor Farm building.
But we do thank the county for using it, because it was an opportunity for us that they give us that we had back in that 1980, that we wouldn't have had that availability.
It's been on the list for the last few years of
Yes.
the top 10 endangered historic
Yes,
structures in the state.
Yes.
How does it feel to know that it is coming down instead of being resurrected into a new life?
Yeah, well, I'm saddened by it, of course. I can't help but think that perhaps someone with vision would have come and tried to rescue it, but that hasn't happened.
I about really hate to see the building tore down, though. That's an old building. I was hoping somebody would buy it and fix it up, but it didn't happen.
Knox County Commissioner Kelly Streeter says the condition of the structure and the price tag that is attached to any improvements needed has made renovation possibilities impossible.
We've had many local interested parties that wanted to reuse that facility for the betterment of people in need in our community, just like it was intended in its first place. And that simply, they couldn't raise enough funds to match the needs of the building. And even back in 2016, developers at that time just said the magnitude of this building and the shape that it's in, inside the building it was built like a fortress, three brick wide walls. To move things and renovate, it's too much when we can invest in other buildings and other areas. Fast forward to today, you can't go inside now. It is now deemed unsafe by the county. It is really not salvageable.
That's why the Knox County Commissioners say they are moving forward with plans to demolish the historic building in order to build a new facility to house the county's emergency management agency and the 911 Central Dispatch Center at a much lower price tag.
That is a very large piece of ground. There's a large piece out front that has nothing on it currently. There is the old poorhouse that sits there currently, and then behind it is a barn that was used for a multitude of different things of storage, and there is also identified graves in the very back of the property.
Online records show as many as possibly 53 graves located out at the Poor Farm Cemetery, or Potter's Field, as it's also known. The dates for those burials range from 1896 to 1931.
I greatly understand, as well as the county commissioners understand, the historical nature of our whole community, and especially those that were the most in need of services at the time, and how that continued to be a place for individuals in our community. I wished we could have made it into something better, but to maintain those that did perish and or are entombed on that ground, we are taking great measure to survey and identify where that is before any type of addition or removal will be completed. And we do have plans to make sure we memorialize that particular facility and the history of it in some form. We are reaching out to some of our historical partners to help us with that, as well as with the township trustees, some options to memorialize those grave sites. So that is what's most important. I know some of our plans have overshadowed that, but we will do everything within our power to maintain integrity of that facility, those grounds, and to move forward.
While this historic structure's days are numbered, the memory of what it once was still lives on for many in our community.
I've encountered a number of people that remember coming out here and visiting Uncle so-and-so or grandfather so-and-so, and they would have like birthday celebrations and things like that in their big dining room they had. And a lot of people thought that it provided a real service into the 1950s. People would go out and visit. On the other hand, I can remember Mom telling us, "You kids are going to drive me to the poorhouse," she would say. Of course, she didn't really mean it, but that's kind of what we remember about it from her.
And while many might think a property such as this one, which has seen so much life and activity during its useful years, might just have some other kind of life still left in it, Richard Day disagrees.
Any other little stories or anything that you remember about things that have happened here, or the culture or the lore of the structure?
It's not haunted. It is not haunted, except by vandals who come and paint obscenities on the walls and break windows and things like that. It's haunted by them, certainly.